different applications that are running on different machines. So that's a typical use case scenario for those. So let's go ahead and create an app password. And for this, let's say we're creating an app password for the Outlook client. So we'll name that Outlook. Next. Now, the password you see here is generated. This is the only time you get to see this here. We typically recommend just copying the password and then feeding it directly into the application. Most of the times, because this is not an easy password to remember, we end up finding that we write these passwords down, which is not what we want. So we just recommend using the password, the clipboard, to copy the password and feeding it into the application. So let's go ahead and copy that. Yeah, and there you have it. Now we've deleted our, we've created our first application password. Moving on. Let's see. Now, this here talks about how to change app passwords for your applications. For more information on that, those links will give you detailed step-by-step guides on how to do that. Pretty much it's the same thing that we just went through. So if you were going to change the password for your email client, you could either just delete the old one and recreate. And we could just go through that real quick. Copy the clipboard again, and there you have it. Now you have your app password. Now you could feed that password into your Outlook client. All right, there we go. Okay, and then that's how you use the application password. All right, cancel that. Okay, now for this demo, we're going to show how to disable app password for your Office 365 tenant. We're not going to actually disable it right now, but at least show you how to get there. And you would need to be signing in as an admin to do this, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and sign in here as my Office 365 admin account. Oh, sorry, I used the other one. Okay, so we're signed into the portal as an admin, and then we go to users and groups, and then we go to the MFA management portal through Office 365, and then select service settings on the top. And now you have the option to disable app passwords for the entire tenant, or you could allow app password. Typically, you would use this scenario where, for organizations who want to disable the use of active clients. That's when you would be disabling app password for the tenant, and so therefore your users would only have access to the browser-based clients such as Link Online, OWA, SharePoint Online. And that's what we have for app passwords. So over to you, Bill.
Thanks today. Looks like we're running a little behind time. Thank you for all the questions. I'll keep answering those as I have the opportunity. But just real quick, let me jump to how you will enable users and admins. There's a few things I want to mention there that are important. Let me switch back to sharing my Internet Explorer browser. Oh, not you. All right, let's see what we can do to speed this up. All right. I'm going to sign in as the administrator. Now, this admin is not enabled for multi-factor authentication. I'm going to go ahead and go to users and groups. There is this set multi-factor authentication requirements, and I'll click on setup. This will take me to a screen where I can enable users and admins. By default, it will only show you the global administrators. If you want to see your users, you'll click on this drop-down box and go to Sign in Allowed Users. Just give it a second to load the users. And you'll notice here we've got some disabled and enforced users. I'm going to select on just one of them. Actually, let me pull up Mary, which is my MFA test user. So with Mary here, and you'll notice that when you set this up, in fact, I'm going to go ahead and disable Mary here, so you can see the different options that we have. So we have enable, and then once actually, let me back up a little bit. So once you disable a user for MFA, basically when you re-enable them, they have to basically start all over. They'll have to set up their contact methods again. They'll have to set up all their app passwords again. So just keep that in mind, is when you disable a user, it's removing all of their multi-factor authentication settings that they may have done previously. I'm going to click on enable. And then we'll have another option here called enforce. So what enabled means, as long as they're not enforced, their rich clients will continue to work without the app passwords. So once the user is enforced or set to enforce, at that point, they need to have those app passwords in order to use the rich clients. When they complete their initial setup of multi-factor authentication, that is what I demonstrated earlier on, the first time experience. When they complete that process, they'll automatically be promoted to enforced. So again, before they do that initial setup, the rich clients will continue to work without the app passwords. Once they complete that initial sign-in, or if an admin comes in here and clicks on enforce, at that point, they'll have to have those app passwords in order to use the rich clients. Now, one of our call drivers that we get, or the common calls is, hey, how can I go in and reset a user's contact methods? Maybe they lost their phone, or they've changed phone numbers, and the user can't get in. Or maybe there's some security breach and they need to reset or remove all the app passwords. You can click on this to manage user settings. And then you got these two options here. You can have them basically reset their contact methods. So it'll be like the first time that they're signing in with MFA. And then the second option here is just to remove all their app passwords. So you can do one or the other, or select both, and then save the changes. And you can do this for other admins as well. All right, now let's move toward on how to access those more advanced features of MFA. What I'm about to show you may be really, really new. And it may generate more questions. So let's just keep the questions to multi-factor authentication. So what I'm going to do is we need a Windows Azure subscription in order to access the more advanced features. So let me sign out. And I'm going to show you the two ways of how you can get a Windows Azure subscription or to associate your directory to that. So the first thing I'm going to show you is let me sign in with a user that does not have a Windows Azure subscription. Okay, come on. You'll need to access what we call the Windows Azure Management Portal, and it's not signing me in correctly. Sign out. Organizational account. Okay, let's try this again. Continue. All right, so hopefully, oh, there we go. That's the screen I'm looking for. Okay, so you need to have a Windows Azure subscription. So I guess the best way to go about getting this Windows Azure subscription is first signing in with your Office 365 credentials, and then coming to the Windows Azure Management Portal URL or website, which is manage.windowsazure.com. And then you'll see an option here to say sign up for Windows Azure. You'll click on that, and then you want to complete this sign up process. One thing I do want to point out is that this does require you to put in the credit card information in order to continue. So you see here, step 3 is payment information. Again, we want to limit this to multi-factor authentication. If you're interested, please provide your feedback if you want to learn more about this. We can certainly do another webcast on this. But you'll complete this sign-up process, and then your directory, your Office 365 directory, will automatically be associated to Windows Azure, which is the next one I'm about to show you. So let me, in this case, sign out. And then I'm going to sign in with a user that has already completed this sign in, which is this account. Go back to manage. And I don't think it's signing me in and out correctly. Let's do this. Having some cookies problem here. Okay, so I know you guys just lost. Seeing my screen, I had to close IE. It's caching my previous sign in. Make sure this comes up correctly, and then once it does, I will share my browser again. There we go. Go ahead and share my screen. All right. Just going to wait a couple seconds here to give it time to load up. Okay, So this is the Windows Azure Management Portal, and this is where you will be able to manage the more advanced features of multi-factor authentication. Again, it does in a day, a little bit later, we'll walk you through on how to set that up. But what I want to show you is how you can add your Office 365 directory to if you had an existing Windows Azure subscription. So you'll notice that I've got many directories here. And actually, what I want to do, I meant to sign in with my Microsoft account because you can only use that. Microsoft account. There we go. Hopefully this gets in correctly. It looks like it is. Okay. And there we go. There we go. Okay, so in the Windows Azure Management Portal, you'll have this, what we call the Active Directory extension. You'll select that. I have a few directories here. So if you have a existing Windows Azure subscription and you just wanted to associate your Office 365 subscription to this, you'll click on Add. Drop down box, you'll get two options here, create a new directory or use a existing directory. You'll select use an existing directory. I am ready to be signed out. Let's check that box. And then you'll be taken to a sign in page. Go ahead and sign in with your Office 365 subscription with the global admin credentials. Then it's going to prompt up with do you want to add your Microsoft account as a global administrator to your Office 365 subscription? And this will just be whatever the name of your organization is. I just so happen to name that, so it's easy to understand. Click on Continue. And we'll go ahead and sign out now. Sign back in with that Microsoft account. And once again, we're having some sign in and sign out issues. There we go. Go back to Active Directory. You notice that before it said 4, now it says 5, and I added this Office 365 subscription here. So that's how you can associate it. Now, you may be in different scenarios, in more complex scenarios, but those are the two common ways. If you don't already have a Windows Azure subscription, the easiest way is just sign in with your Office 365 credentials, go to that manage.windowsazure.com site, and then sign up. And then this association will be automatic. You don't need to do any additional steps. If you already have a Windows Azure subscription, but you need to associate your 365 subscription to that, you must use a Microsoft account and use an existing directory, and then you go through those steps. Now I'm going to give the floor back to Ade. He's going to walk you through on how to add this multi-factor authentication provider so you can get access to that MFA advanced features.
Thanks, Phil. All right, so the Azure MFA provider pretty much is an application service, an Azure application service that enables the protection of your on-prem applications as well as the cloud services and manage and provide the multi-factor authentication for. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go ahead and share my screen out here real quick. There we go. All right. Now, for the Azure MFA provider, it is a pay-for service, and it comes in two billing options. You have the per user billing option and the per authentication billing option. Your per user is $2 a month per user, and I think for the authentication, it is for a set of 10 authentications. You get charged, I think, $1.99 if I'm not mistaken. But for more information on that, though, there's a URL in there that takes you to all the breakdown of what those costs and fees are. For an MFA provider, you need an Azure subscription. Also note, too, you want to separate the difference between an MFA provider and the basic MFA that comes with Office 365. For an MFA provider, you need an Windows Azure subscription for that. Also, because the provider is a subscription service, the admin that's going to be creating that subscription should either be a co-admin or be a service admin for the subscription. Also, an MFA provider is used, can be used in conjunction with an MFA server to provide your on-prem applications multi-factor authentication. We're going to go straight into a demo to go ahead and create that MFA provider. Let me bring up my IE here. So I'm going to sign in with my co-admin's account. There we go. All right. So now for an MFA provider, just a couple of things to note. You can only associate one MFA provider per directory. So for that, to show you a quick demo of what that looks like, to create an MFA provider, you go ahead and click on New at the bottom left-hand corner of your Azure portal. Select Application Services, Active Directory, Multi-Factor Authentication Provider. Click Create, and just give it you can name it whatever you want. Typically, I name it the directory I associate it with. So. And this is where you choose the usage model, either the per enabled user or per authentication. Now, keep in mind though, once you whatever usage model you select or any MFA provider settings you make, these cannot be changed after they've been configured. So for your directory, all the list of directories that you currently have in your tenant would be here in a drop-down list. Right now, I have 2 directories, and both of them are currently associated with a link to an MFA provider. That's why you don't see them down here. Now, you can create an MFA provider without linking it to a directory. Those providers that aren't linked to a directory are what you use in conjunction with your MFA server to provide the MFA authentication for your on-prem applications. So we'll just go ahead and create an MFA provider without linking it to a directory here. Okay, now to view our MFA provider, you would go to click on Active Directory, and in your list of directories, go ahead and select the multi-factor authentication providers, and you can the MFA provider I just created here, and it's not going to let us change any of the settings, like I stated initially. And also, if you wanted to manage the provider to get to the more advanced settings the page, you would click on Manage. And that takes you to your MFA provider settings. Some of the advanced features that you have in here, you have the fraud alert. Pretty much with a fraud alert, what that does for you is you could enable it to where if a user gets an MFA code on their phone that they didn't initiate, you could enable it to where they either push the 0 key and then it sends an email alert to whatever email account that we enter in here, as well as also we could say if the user has reported a fraud, a possible or potential fraud, go ahead and block that account completely. So that's one of the cool features with the MFA provider. Another cool feature in here is the one-time bypass. So say for instance, your user forgets their device at home and they're at work, you could actually force them to bypass the second factor of authentication for a period of time. You could set it for that entire day, and then after that day it resets again back to the default. So that's what you could do with the one-time bypass. Another one that we've seen that we get calls on is the custom voice message. The custom voice message pretty much is just another way to let your users know that the call is originating or the request for another authentication is coming from your organization by just customizing the alert for the MFA service. Now, a couple of things to know about configuring the voice messages. When you're, let's actually do this here. When you're creating this, make sure you leave the application blank, the application name blank, and make sure that the language that you select here is just EN. Yeah, so it's just those are just a couple of things to note when you're setting these up. This is where it asks you to upload any files that you have, and yeah, and also too from the provider, this is also where you could download your SDK as well as the MFA server. All right, now deleting an MFA provider, it's pretty straightforward as well. To delete the provider, we simply just start with, we go to the directory. So we select Active Directory, we select multi-factor authentication providers, highlight whichever provider we want to delete, and delete. Yes. Okay. All right, so that's it. That's what we have for the MFA provider. Now we'll go into some troubleshooting, some common issues that we see at support. Some of these are just more awareness points. Because you could have up to 40 passwords for your application for app passwords. There's an increased area for theft because these passwords are not easy to remember. So you typically have users writing them down, and we strongly advise not to write them down, but rather use the clipboard feature and put those into the application's credential prompt. Another thing to note too is sometimes you could have applications that cache passwords could start failing. A typical scenario is where you've enabled MFA for a user. The user has configured app password, and then the MFA is disabled for that user. If that user is a federated user, the next time the user is trying to prompt for the rich client prompts for credentials. Although you enter your proper username and password, because the password was already cached, you find users getting a behavior where they keep on being prompted for creds over again. So to resolve that, you just need to clear the application cache and go forward from there. The third bullet point we have is client access control features on ADFS. For those who are familiar with the client access policy rules for Office 365, this is where you restrict access to the O365 services based on the user location. Location here would mean on the corporate network versus the internet. Now, once you enable a federated user for MFA, those client access policy rules no longer apply to the rich client. Reason that happens is because the app password is a password that's generated by Windows Azure, and for ADFS authentication, the password is stored in Active Directory. So that's why you have that. That's why rich clients bypass app passwords. The fourth one, the orphaned MFA provider. What that is basically is we've seen scenarios where admins want to test out the new MFA feature and want to test it out with their Office 365 tenant. This was prior to the inclusion of the basic MFA service in O365. Prior to that, you would need the Azure MFA provider to test it out. So what we found is that admins will test this out, linking their Office 365 tenant into their Azure tenant, and then creating an MFA provider, but would later delete the trial, the free trial, the free Azure subscription trial, without leading the MFA provider. Now, what happens in that scenario is that if eventually you do switch over to an Azure paid service, and you then want to create a, you then link your Office 365 tenants to the new Azure paid service, and now you want to create an MFA provider and link it to that Office 365 tenant. If the subscription you had deleted, the trial subscription you had deleted, if that hasn't, if that's still in the wait state, which is about 90 days, then you're not going to be able to create an MFA provider and link it to your Office 365 tenant until that has been deleted. So the process, the procedure to get to resolve that, it will require you to open up a ticket with support, and then we would have to do some more and do the work on our back end. So just to keep in mind, for any free trials that you sign up for and testing the MFA provider, make sure you delete the provider before you delete the subscription. The fifth bullet here is I'm not receiving the code for MFA. This is pretty much a straightforward troubleshooting for this. It's either you have the user try and reset the MFA option to either switch from making a phone call to a text or using the mobile application. If all that fails, then as the admin, you could go ahead and force the user to go through the set it up process again to set up multi-factor authentication. And that's what we have for common issues. Let's see. And these here are just a list of potential call drivers. They're all messages that are referencing typically when the user can't receive a call or can't receive a text. The solution, like we just talked about, is to either have the user change the options or, as the admin, force the user to go through step it up again. And that's, I think, what we have for the slide. Yes.
Yeah, there's, before we end real quick, there's one more issue I really wanted to hit on. I know we're out of time, but this is a very common call that we get. This is when you enable a admin for MFA, and then they go and try to access the Windows Azure Active Directory PowerShell. And then, obviously, as they may have already talked about, we don't support the PowerShell yet for MFA-enabled users or admins. And then you go and try to disable the admin from MFA. They still can't access PowerShell after. The solution to that, some of you may have ran into this, is to restart the sign-in assistant. The sign-in assistant is caching your token. So if you restart the sign-in assistant, then you should be able to access PowerShell after that. But that's it.